economy of words that you can win arguments, you can win contracts. Hemingway purposely left the gaps between the sentences so that do you practice economy of words? So, this is the episode for you. Noise. I'm going to talk about noise. So there's a lot of noise. There's a noise around social media about war situation in different countries and social media coverage. Everybody is speaking. Every single person is speaking. And do you know what it creates at the end of the day? Unnecessary clutter. You have to take a deep breath to understand what is going on around. Words, 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 and words, you are completely inundated with words. It's a flood of words. So a lot of noise and no peace. Practice the economy of words. Today's topic is going to be the economy of words. I'm sure you must have heard about this fancy term, the economy of words. But what is it exactly? So let's think about it. When you speak less, feel that you are much more confident. When you speak in a manner which is terse, concise, and clear, do you feel confident? When you speak less, and do more, do you feel confident? When you speak very clearly in very short sentences, but able to convey the same message to a number of people, do you feel confident? If yes, you're already practicing the economy of words. So, the economy of words. It sounds very fancy, but it's very simple. Speak less and mean more. That is the thing which we do not practice in day-to-day life. So let's talk about this more. In psychology, there are two terminologies. One is processing fluency, and the other one that I'm going to talk about is cognitive load. Let's talk about processing fluency. So what happens when you present a matter or any subject matter in a concise and clear manner, which can be easily processed by the listeners, the audience, that automatically generates trust. It's basically a psychological analysis, and it's a trait in psychology. So if you're able, if I am able to process whatever you're saying in a very clear and concise manner, I understood whatever you've said, that means I have been able to understand and you have been able to convey the things, and that is nothing but processing fluency, and that creates considerable trust and honesty between the two parties, that is the listener and obviously the speaker. Now let's talk about cognitive load. When you use a lot of terminologies, a lot of flood of the words, and a lot of jargons, the other person ends up being confused. Your brain ends up not taking that much of load, and you enter in a state which is completely full of conundrums, completely full of confusion, and that is nothing but that is a cognitive load. A lot of experts, because of their expertise in different subjects, they tend to speak a lot of words, probably try to over explain things, and there, your mind goes off. But it's just one of the traits of experts, because they want to consider you to come at the same level of understanding as they have. But eventually you end up losing interest in the topic, because the topic is something which is going over your head, right? So these kind of things happen, and that is why processing fluency is such an important thing. It's one of the most talked about trait in the psychoanalysis. Now let me give you an example of an interesting study. So I guess there was one university, if I'm not mistaken, it was Princeton University. So they conducted a very interesting experiment. What they did is they collected performance data of various stocks. So surprisingly, the stocks which were easily pronounced by the investors, they performed really and exceptionally well in the beginning, and they were surprised. So this was nothing but this was just processing fluency. So if somebody is fluent, if somebody can pronounce the name of the stocks, it automatically generated trust and a pattern of honesty between the buyers and the seller, and eventually those stocks with easily pronunciable names eventually get traction, and they were the best performing stocks. So this is just an interesting example of processing fluency. Now let's talk about some interesting figures in the past. Was Abraham Lincoln. Have you heard his Gettysburg speech or Gettysburg address? Go and search about it. You will be surprised to know that it just was a speech that was, there were many soldiers that were martyred in the Battle of Gettysburg. And because of that, he eventually presented a speech that lasted only 2 minutes and consisted of 272 precise words. And this is one of the most talked about political speeches in the history. And you will understand how Abraham Lincoln practiced the economy of words. Isn't it fascinating? It is. Now, I'm going to tell you about one interesting figure who also practiced the economy of words, and that is the famous personality, Ernest Hemingway. Ernest Hemingway, his famous work that always practiced the brevity, of storytelling. And the best example is his six-word story. Do you know about that six-word story by Ernest Hemingway? Go and read about it. So it was just a story that was spoken in just 6 words. Imagine just 6 words and you end up with a story. So here are the words by Ernest Hemingway. Shoes for sale, babies never born. It basically tells a very tragic story about, an incident in somebody's life where he's selling the shoes of the babies and those babies were never born. You can understand that Ernest Hemingway purposely left the gaps between the sentences so that you, as the listeners and audience and as the readers, can fill in the gaps. Understand, this is actually another psychological aspect where storytellers maintain brevity and leave pauses, silences in between the sentences, and the listeners and the readers complete those sentences in their own way and imagination. So this is an interesting pattern, which is again practice of economy of words. Now I'm going to give you another important person, not in the history, in the recent times, who practiced the practice of economy of words, and he was Steve Jobs. Have you ever noticed the very first speeches of Steve Jobs when he was launching the iPhone? He just spoke about, I am going to change and reinvent the phone. And that's it. In this simple sentence, he spoke about everything. He spoke about he's reinventing a phone, and he spoke about he's launching iPhone. So he was one of, the great practitioners of, the brevity of the speeches, the economy of the words. And we all know about the products, we all use, iPhone products, and we use Apple products in day-to-day's life. But the best part of this, pioneering figure, Steve Jobs, was the fact that he was able to communicate very clearly, very concisely, and people were able to process his information, whatever he wanted to convey to the world. And he practiced the economy of words. Think about it. Now let's talk about some of the interesting professions where, brevity and, this economy of words is practiced. Have you ever noticed, a setup in the court where the judges are very particular about concise arguments? They always insist lawyers to have arguments which are concise and which are precise so that it can save, the court's timings. In fact, most of the Supreme Courts, in the United States, even the famous ones, have always advised the lawyers to be very precise and to be very concise, in their arguments so that they can present the case in the most effective and, time-bound manner. So this is interesting because being a lawyer, being from this profession, I understand the economy of words as well because I try to practice that. So there was a study by Harvard Law School. They came to know that while one of the programs they were running on contract negotiations, they came to know that if, one of the parties puts a silence and a pause during the contract negotiation, then, it is a psychological impact that the other party, tries to reveal more or tries to speak more. And in the event of speaking more, they try to reveal more. So this is another, interesting research-based aspect of practicing the economy of words, that you can win arguments, you can win contracts. So it's just the psychological nitty-gritty that comes with, speaking less and meaning more, speaking less and impacting more. So these are some of the interesting conversations that I just wanted to pick up and speak with you. And I hope that this particular episode of Economy of Words would prove to be beneficial for you, for your career, and for your communication skills. I hope most of you can attain maximum knowledge, present your thoughts in a clear, concise manner, and at the same time, practice the economy of words and win the situations in your life. I hope you have gained ample of knowledge and you try to incorporate this knowledge in your day-to-day life, in your career, in your communication skills. For more updates and more such interesting episodes, do follow Attorney Speaks and subscribe for more. Thank you.